you are relativizing them, and they have no force other than they get you what you want under your circumstances. I think moral rules turn out to be something different, and the illustrations that I gave up there incite something in us, and what you saw, felt and saw about those things that I showed wasn't like, well, that's not getting us what we want in our culture as well as we would like it. That violates what we've described or decided will give us moral flourishing or human flourishing. I think what you realize is that these things were wrong, whether the culture that did it felt it was flourishing or not.
Let me ask a different question. Why do you think that if one abandons the kind of moral realism that you espouse, which seems to have a single correct morality, that everything is going to fall apart and that we're stuck with relativism? Relativism being the view that what's right or wrong is simply a function of the conventions enforcing your society. Isn't there a third alternative, the one I described?
Well, you described relativism as conventionalism. Conventionalism is one type of relativism. Relativism is whenever the authority of the moral rule that's being posited comes from the subject and not from the object. In other words, whenever it is the group or the individual, however it's characterized, they are the one who decides what's right and wrong. But of course, when you have those circumstances, then you have freed up the group to decide whatever they want in their circumstances, what is right or wrong, and you don't have any standing from which to object. We can't complain that Jews are oppressing Palestinians, for example, because that's their own cultural problem. They have their own moral rules. We have ours. There is, as you pointed out, a pluralism of moralities, and that's just a different one. Now, my view is that we are in a position, because we can reflect and see that some things are wrong regardless of what people agree on and regardless of what culture they happen to live in. But that can only be true if morals are objective in some sense. And that with regards to any given thing, like persecuting Palestinians, there is an answer for that. It isn't a matter of what an individual culture or person decides.
One of the arguments that you used proceeded by saying that there is a vocabulary, the words like right, wrong, has a right, just, and so on and so forth, which are only usable if you think that there is a unique, correct morality. Why do you think that's so? Why can't there be uses for these words in the several plural moralities that are describable?
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'll let you answer that
I'll answer
question.
real quickly. I think it can be used in lots of different ways, as you're suggesting. But what I'm saying is when you use it in those conventionalistic or subjectivistic ways, it takes the guts out of it. It isn't real morality anymore. It is just somebody's decision on how he wants to act, or a group of people's decision on how they want to act, and there's nothing more that you can say about it.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Kokel back for his rebuttal. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. There's a lot that can be said here, and the difficulty of a debate is things move very, very quickly, and things are said and you move on to other things, so rebuttals tend to be a little bit of a jumble. But I just want to make a general observation. There is a term that is used in discussions of complex nature. And the term is called blinding with science. Have you ever heard that phrase before? This is where you have kind of an uneducated or somebody who is not schooled in a particular discipline, say science, and they ask a particular question. And the scientist then overwhelms them with jargon and information to what ends up doing is obscuring this, what seemed like a simple question and a fairly straightforward thing. And the person walks away scratching their head thinking, wow, he must know a lot more than I do because I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. And I have a feeling that there is something like this that's going on here. You might call it a blinding with philosophy. I'm not saying this is being done intentionally to confuse or whatever, but I think this is what happens, though, when we take something that is fairly straightforward and we try to complexify it the way that's been done tonight. The implication here is that none of you can understand morality, right and wrong. What could be more basic to human existence unless you have a degree in philosophy? Unless you can work out all these little details and understand all of these fancy words. I promise you, you do not need that. Now, the philosophical education is valuable for dialing things down and refining things and weighing things and coming clearer about particular things. But when it comes to the issue of whether there is right and wrong, there are only two options. And you can strain at definitions like relativism and conventionalism and objectivism or whatever. Use whatever terms you want, but there are only two options. And those two options are that moral obligations do exist over all people, or they don't. And if they don't, any moral system that some group assembles has no authority beyond itself. We've heard that people assemble moral systems in order to facilitate human flourishing. I think that's true. I think human flourishing is a valuable moral good, in fact. And when we get in the way of human flourishing, then we are doing something wrong. And in fact, when we see vivid examples of such obstruction, we stand up immediately and we object. We say things like, that is intolerant. That shouldn't be done. There ought to be a law. That was wrong. That violated my rights. Now, each of these things are terms that can be used to describe a relativistic set of values. It's kind of like playing Monopoly. You know, Monopoly has rules that Parker Brother made, and you can play according to the rules. But if you don't want to play according to the rules, you can make up your own. Those are called house rules. And if you don't want to play Monopoly at all, you don't have to. You can just quit. The morality that's been described by Professor is a morality much like Monopoly. It may be sophisticated in its rules. It may be geared toward particular ends. But notice the ends that are described are good ends, allegedly. And these are the right ways to get to good ends. Notice the moral concept that has been smuggled in there. What makes the end good to begin with? It isn't our agreement of it, because it's our agreement of activities that are meant to get us to that good end. It strikes me as eminently obvious that we are talking about objective truths here. By the way, I am not talking about why there are objective truths. That is a different question. It isn't the debate. I have not mentioned God in this debate. I don't intend to, except for just then. This is irrelevant to whether or not these things exist. And you don't need to believe in God in order to know morality. I'm talking about the real McCoy. What has been described here has been defended, as far as I can tell, in only one way. The assertion has been made that the idea that there's a simple correct morality is incoherent. The word incoherent means you can't make sense of it. It's irrational. There is some kind of internal contradiction with the notion. Now, I don't have a PhD in philosophy, but I have a master's with honors in philosophy. And for the life of me, I can't see what is incoherent about the idea of believing there are rights and wrongs. And in fact, I think many of you are thinking, gee, it seems to make a lot of sense to me. Now, it doesn't mean my view is correct, but certainly I don't see how my view is incoherent. So that was the first real objection that was raised against my view. And the second one was an observation. And the observation was, look, there are lots of different moralities in different cultures.